That month is a pain in the hole to spell anyway.
Yeah.
You know when you just have those absolute blanks?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're live.
That month is a pain in the hole to spell anyway.
Okay. Okay, so we're live somewhere. Are we live in the right place?
I'm not sure. I'm checking now.
Hello to anyone who's there, seeing us somewhere.
No, I think we're in the wrong place.
How do I make
I
it?
believe so.
How do I make it in the right place?
Oh, wait. No, yeah, but it's not on the scheduled one, but we are live on the channel.
Okay, we have to work out how to get the Zoom onto the scheduled one.
We might not be able to.
If you go in through manage videos, I think.
I'm there sort of clicking buttons, but
and I think if you go into this details,
I'm on stream settings and I'm just randomly clicking buttons and not much is happening. Error, duplicate stream, new key below live. I don't know what that means.
I think it's because we're streaming on the other one at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how to combine the two.
Hang on, I'm going to join from the computer and try and do it at my end.
Yeah. Hello to anyone who is watching. We will one day get this all streamlined.
But it is not this day.
Yeah.
Hello, Michael. Hello. I believe I've seen you in the chat before. We are very likely going to be moving this into the actual scheduled one soon, depending on whether or not Naoise can get that working.
Yeah, Naoise has volunteered himself for the thankless task of tech wrangler.
Mm.
I'm just going to exit out of that and leave Naoise to do his thing.
Yeah.
So February is almost over. We're nearly in March. 1 year of lockdown.
Yeah, and they're still not pursuing zero COVID.
Yeah.
Even though we absolutely could because we're an island.
We could, but you know, we've got that whole slightly questionable border with the UK, which we don't want to talk about. My brother actually got first dose of the jab because he's because he's a quarter of a doctor. He's a medical student-y thing.
Cool.
And he happened to be in one of the days when they'd done all the ones they're meant to do that day, but they had some left. So medical students being vaccinated.
And my mother is scheduled for it because she works in this kind of care homey place.
Oh, good.
I think I'm back.
Anyone actually making use of the place? Okay, we have Naoise.
We have Naoise.
There we are.
Hey, Naoise.
Hello. Gotta love the tech issues. So what are we doing today?
Other than wrangling technology?
Well, that's always fun, but other than that, what are we up to?
I I've spent most of today wrangling technology.
What tech were you wrangling?
After Effects again.
Fun.
I have to get rid of a head this time. Oh, Deirdre!
Oh, we've got a Deirdre.
Hello.
Hey, Dee.
All right. I think at this point,
Hmm.
we're 5 minutes over schedule. We may as well just go from where we're going.
Yeah, if people are coming, they're coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope. Are we in the right place? Or are we still?
We're in a place.
Okay,
We're in a place.
The channel went live. People knew the channel was going to go live at around this time. It's fine. We'll work it out for next time. Anyway, hello,
Hello.
everyone who is watching. We are Unlicensed Oral Arts. We're a bunch of storytellers from Ireland. And this evening, we're going to be straying from the topic a little bit and telling you some stories.
Indeed.
So my name is Stephen. I am a storyteller and folklorist. And if you want to look up my work anywhere, just look for Hog and Dice. I'm the only one that name is ever attached to. So, Emily.
Hi, I didn't know we had a topic. I'm Emily, storyteller and dog lover. And if you want to find my other stuff, I'm Tales from the Shadows and Sounds from the Shadows. It's confusing. I thought having two separate names would make things simpler, but it didn't.
And I'm Nisha. I can be found various places, but mostly here, to be perfectly honest with you, because I'm a recluse and shut in these days.
We all are.
We all are. But mine is almost voluntarily at this stage, because I cannot handle the outside world anymore. And I tell stories generally of filth and depravity, because that's what interests me.
And at some stage this evening, he's going to make me pull the face.
Oh, I'm hoping so. I'm proud of this one. There's a lovely moment halfway through, which lasts for uncomfortably long.
Oh, dear.
So, speaking of the stories, one is a bit lighter and a bit of fun romp. One is just quite depressing. So I'm not sure if you want to start off getting depressed this evening and then I'll lift the mood, or do we want to just go for a bit of a...
I know. No, let us cheer up towards the end, I'd say.
Excellent.
Which is the more depraved? Is the depraved the good or the happy or the...
Oh, they're both depraved.
Oh,
They're
okay.
both depraved.
I was talking to Nisha.
Well, speaking of, I might as well kick things off with a lovely depressing one then.
Mm-hmm.
In a small town in Friesland, there lived a butcher. The butcher and his wife had 3 children. Their 2 sons, Hans and Otto, 5 and 6 respectively, and their baby girl, Amelia. One day, the butcher was slaughtering a pig. He led the beast away from where the rest of the pigs were to where the bucket was kept. He led the pig over the bucket. Its large nostrils just began to recognize the scent of blood when the butcher drew his knife across the pig's throat. The butcher held its head up to help the blood flow as it gushed out into the bucket below. Hans and Otto watched. They liked to watch their father work and were looking forward to the black pudding later. The next day, their friend Greta came by. Greta ate black pudding with Hans and Otto, while their mother got ready to give Amelia a bath. The 3 children went outside to play. "What shall we play?" asked Greta. "Let's play butcher," said Hans. So the 3 children decided to play butcher. "I'll be the cook," said Hans. "I'll be the butcher," said Greta. "I'll be the pig," said Otto. Otto got down on all fours, and Greta led him to the bucket, away from the pigs. Otto could smell the pig's blood from earlier. It made him think of black pudding, and the left a metallic taste in his mouth. "What do I do now?" asked Greta. And Hans told her to take the knife and cut the pig's throat. "How?" she asked, and Hans showed her. So Greta drew the knife across Otto's throat, and the pig squealed. Hans held up Otto's head to help the blood flow into the blood bucket. It reminded him of black pudding. Their mother heard Otto scream. She put Amelia down beside the tub and rushed outside. When she saw Hans holding Otto over the bucket, she screamed, and Greta ran away. She asked Hans what had happened. "We were playing butcher," he said, smiling at his mother. She looked at Otto. He was very pale, almost white, apart from his neck. The neck was red, still dripping blood into the bucket. She looked back at Hans. He was still smiling at her. She took the knife, and it was in Hans's throat. She remembered Amelia. She ran inside and saw Amelia in the tub. It was quiet. The baby wasn't breathing. The butcher returned home. He saw Otto, slumped over the bucket, with Hans lying beside him, a knife sticking out of his neck. He went inside the house and saw his wife hanging from the rafters. Greta returned home to her father, who patted her on the head and asked her what she'd done that day. "I played butcher," she said, smiling up at him. The end. Got to love the classics like the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, that's only one of two versions of that one.
Yep.
You guys familiar with the other one?
Yeah, it's about the judgment afterwards.
Yeah. Which I found very odd when I was reading it. I was thinking of trying to work it in, but found it jarred with the rest. For those who don't know it, in the other version, one of the children is not apprehended by their mother, but they're actually apprehended by the local town magistrate, who takes them to the courthouse, and they put the child on trial. The defense is that the child was just playing a game. They didn't understand the consequences of their actions. So to prove this, they decided to offer the child either an apple or a gold coin, reasoning that a child who was innocent would immediately go for the immediately valuable and tasty apple as opposed to money, in signifying that they would be evil. Because even fairy tales understand the pursuit of money is evil. They're anti-capitalist. And the child, of course, reaches for the apple and is let go off scot-free. And that's why you don't let your children play butcher.
I know the Grimm brothers, they left it out of their later editions because they realized, oh, kids are reading this.
Yeah.
But it kind of strikes me as like, just, you know, this was a story people didn't consider like a story or fairy tale. This was a thing that happened that they were just remarking on. So which makes it even more horrific.
It's also the kind of thing that kids actually talk about, though.
Yeah.
Like, I was remembering back recently, when I was much younger, me and my sister had a really good friend who lived in Bray, quite close to us. And we used to go up and visit his house about once or twice every week. And he had this shed in his back garden, and loads of times but it was really difficult to get to. Like, you had to climb through this really rotten fence to get all the way to the back. And loads of times we go out there in middle of the day, but it would be dark inside, and then we just start telling ghost stories. And I remember there was this recurring character who I can't for the life of me remember. But like, thinking back on it, I know a lot of people in Bray talked about this character. So either they are a folkloric figure who existed in Bray and I've missed my chance to collect some original folklore, or it was just some child's literary character and I just didn't happen to read the book at the time.
Happens all the time.
I know. It's the pain of our craft.
I had a weird experience with children telling grisly stories. There's an art camp called Pine Forest, which is up sort of in the border of the Dublin Wicklow Mountains, and it's a lovely place. And I went there as a kid, and I worked there as an adult. But when I was there as a child, about 10, we were sitting in one of the chalets. It was raining, and so we started telling each other ghost stories, because you do as kids. And one of the kids told this the urban legend about the the girl in the house, and her dog always sleeps under her bed, and she puts her hand down, and the dog licks her fingers. And someone told that story, and it stuck in my head because I like dogs. Anyway, nearly 20 years later, I'm there working as a teacher at a Halloween course. And in the same chalet where I heard that story, I hear another child telling that story.
Excellent.
And I was just like, wow. I don't know what this is, but this is something.
That's one of the ones that I first encountered online back when I was an insomniac, back when I embraced my insomniac nature and would just spend hours on the internet each night. And it was one of those ones which, like, I don't know why I did it. I think a lot of people have come to horror this way, but that when I was younger, I couldn't handle horror. I really couldn't. It was so bad that when can't even remember the creature's name, but the ice monster in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, as soon as that came on screen, I shut down the whole family watching Empire Strikes Back, and they couldn't watch it for another year with me in the room. Heffalumps on Parade from Winnie the Pooh literally did give me nightmares for a month. So I could not handle stuff, but I was obsessed with reading this weird dark material when I was a teenager. And I remember giving myself one of 3 panic attacks I've had in my life purely by reading that stuff too late at night when everyone else was asleep.
It's weird how
the first time
terrify you.
The first time I heard that story was from my older cousin, who is from Seattle in America. He was staying with us one summer, and he just told me and my brother that story, and it was fine. I was about like 11, I think.
Perfect age for it.
Yeah. Just old enough to understand the repercussions.
That was one of my problems as well. I wouldn't understand a lot of the ghost stories that we used to tell, so my sister would end up having to explain them to me. So by the time she processed the fear, I was then left shitting it.
I used to have an awful lot of really bad nightmares as a very young child. So I developed lucid dreaming as a self-defense mechanism early on. Just like since then, I just don't really have nightmares anymore. As soon as it gets scary or stressful, I either just immediately decide to wake up, or I fix it.
I don't really get nightmares. I get bad dreams, but I don't really get nightmares as such. But I do get sleep paralysis, which is fun.
Ooh. Yeah, I've only had that the once, and it was terrifying.
I've only had it a handful of times, but as I mentioned to Stephen over Twitter, once was after a very realistic dream that someone had smothered me while I was lying in my bed.
Ooh.
And then I woke up and I couldn't move. And there was this moment of, is this it? Is this death? But then I remembered, there's this thing called sleep paralysis. This is probably what it is. And that made it much less scary.
Like once I was aware of what sleep paralysis was, I wasn't afraid of it happening again. It's just like, yourself, it's the uncertainty. What the hell has just happened to me? Why can't I move?
Yeah.
Stephen,
so we should probably tell another story.
Yeah, we probably should. Just
what?
Do you have one in mind, Stephen?
All right, well, there is one I could do. So, there was a blind fiddler in the county of Longford. Now, he would make his money traveling from town to town, playing music for anyone who wanted to listen, anyone who wanted to have a little bit of a dance. And he was especially beloved in Edwardstown. And so, when the fiddler had been missing for several months, it was the people of Edwardstown who were particularly worried by this. And was one man in Edwardstown who thought he knew what had happened and how to fix it. This man's name was Harry Stottle. He was aware that the fairies were often in the habit of kidnapping human musicians of particular talent. And so Harry led an expedition up to the top of a nearby fairy hill called Mount Award, because up on the top of that hill was a hole leading down into the fairy world. And so when they reach the top of the hill, Harry, he ties a rope around his waist. He has his friends lower him down into the fairy hill. When he reaches the bottom, he unties the rope from around his waist, he lights up his torch, and he ventures forward into the depths of the hill. As it happens, he needn't have lit the torch at all. Barely 30 seconds later, he stepped into a brightly lit chamber, glittering walls, the most beautiful space he'd ever seen. And he could hear wonderful music, wonderful strains of the fiddle. And it didn't just sound gorgeous, it sounded familiar. And he sees that sitting in a chair by the fire is the blind fiddler. But sitting across from him on the other side of the fire was this gorgeous woman. Her skin shimmered in the firelight. She was clad in silken green with gold embroidery. She had a big silver scissors hanging from her hip. And next to her on the floor sat a huge shaggy dog. She turned and looked at Harry and demanded to know what he was doing there. And he said, "No, I've come here to bring my friend back home. You fairy people, you've taken him away. He needs to come home where he's safe." And the two of them fall to arguing. Harry bellowing and shouting at the top of his lungs, the fairy woman screeching and shrieking back at him. But all the while, the fiddler sat in his chair, not looking at anyone, because of course he couldn't, but showing no sign that he could hear these two arguing about his fate with no regard for what he thought. Harry had seen him play many times. Usually he would tap his foot as he played, but he wasn't doing that now. Usually he would smile and laugh as he played, but nothing. Instead, he just sat there stiff, the only movement, his hands moving back and forth across the fiddle. He scarcely seemed to breathe. Now, eventually, the fairy woman hissed at Harry. "My dog will be waking up soon, and you had better get out of here before that happens, because he will attack and I will not be able to save you." Harry thinks about this, and he looks over at the fiddler, who he wouldn't even recognize as being alive if he weren't playing the fiddle right at that moment. And he thinks maybe it's too late, maybe I can't save him. All right, fine, I'll leave. But I have to bring back some kind of token, some evidence that I found him. And the fairy woman smiles. She takes the silver scissors from her hip. She goes over to the fiddler and cuts off his finger. The fiddler He doesn't scream in pain. He doesn't flinch. He barely even pauses in his playing. And his hand, his maimed hand, continued to move back and forth over the strings, spraying blood everywhere as it passed, dripping it all over his lovely fiddle, all over his clothes, all over the floor. The fairy woman wrapped the finger up in tissue paper and gave it to Harry, who took it in trembling hands, placed it in his pocket, and left back to where he came in. He tied the rope around his waist again, shouted to be brought up. When he reached the top, he tried to explain what he'd seen, what had happened. And nobody would believe him until he showed them the finger. And there we go.
It reminds me a little bit, the thing with the finger, of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
I still haven't read that. People keep telling me to read it.
It's a massive book. I listened to it on Audible, on an audio version.
Okay.
It's really interesting because the book it's full of footnotes, as if it's an actual historical record, but loads of the footnotes are stories. And then she wrote a collection of these stories, The Ladies of Grace Jew, and they're all versions of fairy or folk tales, but how they would work in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's brilliant because it's sort of written in the style of, you know, Jane Austen or Henry Fielding.
But then, just more like,
only more, you know,
kind of
wizards.
Yeah. Regency supernatural.
Yeah, only it starts with sort of magic has been gone, so all gentlemen wizards are really gentlemen scholars. No one does actual magic until Mr. Norrell shows up. I highly recommend it.
It's an excellent. If you're not feeling compelled to wade through a weighty tome, I also really enjoyed the miniseries that was on. Was it BBC?
I think it was BBC.
I believe it was.
I really enjoyed it either way. I think they captured the feel of the series, and I was worried that it might go through too many Hollywood changes.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff that you have to cut out because the book is like yay thick.
Yeah. Not
an exaggeration. You could, you know, kill someone quite easily with this book.
Mm-hmm.
Thick enough to beat a goat to death with.
Really, fantasy books should be just registered on like what size animal you could kill with it.
What height do you drop it from?
The standard height of 10 feet.
You know, Tolkien apparently, I only recently learned this, originally intended The Lord of the Rings to be published as one volume.
You couldn't carry that around with you.
You couldn't even publish one volume.
Like my dad was telling us that, you know, he read Lord of the Rings secretly under his desk at school because they had those old like flippy desks. If it had all been one volume, you wouldn't have been able to fit it under there.
Yeah.
We're depriving an entire generation of school children.
I actually often did that myself. I didn't use the flippy desk. I'd have it just under the desktop.
You still couldn't fit all 3 Lord of the Rings under there.
No, absolutely not. One person once asked me why I was reading the dictionary.
Were you reading the Dictionary of Elvish?
No, I was just reading The Lord of the Rings. They were comparing the thickness, I imagine.
Yeah.
Again, it's how you judge books. Thickness. Doesn't matter the content, title, cover art, it's just thickness.
We once had, at my mother's house, I don't know where it's gone now, universal English dictionary. So like way more extensive than English dictionaries usually are.
Mm.
It was bolted together. It was that thick.
Wow. I remember at school they had this very annoying thing of, if I would, because I'm dyslexic, I would regularly ask, how do you spell something? And they would tell me to look it up in the dictionary.
Because that's helpful.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And also, we had like those, 10-year-olds school dictionaries, which are only about yay thick. So a lot of the time, the word I wanted wasn't in that dictionary.
Add to that the whole American versus English Great British spelling. It's great.
Yeah.
My spell check on my laptop keeps insisting that there's no U in colour.
Well, they're wrong, objectively.
I'm of the belief that there's no right or wrong way to spell things as long as whoever's reading it knows what you mean. English is a parasitic and ever-evolving language. But I think the word looks better with a U in it.
That's my stance. If it's more pleasing to the eye, then it's better. Besides, I wrote to put a bloody U in colour. As a fellow dyslexic, I had to suffer through it. You have to suffer through it as well.
It's more what's the word? Symmetrical, because it's got an even number of letters.
Yeah, it's nice. Feels wrong without the U.
Well, we have now got suitably off topic.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell a story. So I was looking through Lady Wilde, Ancient Cures, Charms and Usages of Ireland. I was looking up, okay, let's find out some interesting old cures. But then I found at the back there was Legend of Shark Island. There's a load of stories included as well. It's like, I don't know anything about Shark Island. I was thinking there would be sharks because it's actually listed as a legend of shark. So I was thinking, okay, cool. I don't know very many, Irish stories involving sharks. No sharks. It just happens on Shark Island. But it's a very interesting story, and I'm going to tell you. Now, this story involves a woman called Mary Callan. Now, Mary was a peculiar woman because though she came from a large family and all of her brothers and sisters had had many children, she herself only had one child. And this was something by choice. Mary was very particular. She learned from her mother and from the other women in the community all about, counting days and about certain herbs like parsley and pennyroyal that could be made into a tea or even a lotion. And she was very certain after she gave birth to her first child that she never again bore another. And that was because soon after Mary had given birth to her first child, something happened to her. It was a dark night, and Mary had been fast asleep. Her little babe was lying in their cot next to her bed, and whenever the babe stirred, Mary would wake. She could reach down, touch the child, soothe them back to sleep, pick them up if they needed feeding. And in the middle of the night, she heard a sound. She thought it must be the child stirring, so she went to strike a light. But when she struck the light, she saw that she was not alone in the room with her child. There were two figures there, two figures bent over her child. She was about to scream, but the figures, when they saw the light, when they saw her, let go of the child and grabbed Mary instead. They dragged her out of the house and up onto a horse. They rode off into the darkness. Mary tried to shout, but her voice seemed to be gone. It was caught by the wind and shoved back into her throat. At last, she wasn't sure after how long, but at last they came to a grand house. The two figures got off the horse, dragged Mary inside into a fine room with tapestries on the wall, with a great oak table, and in the centre, a bowl full of ointment. They told her not to touch anything and left. Mary, of course, began to touch things, looking for a way out. She went to the bowl and was full of something slick. It seemed to have a sheen on it. She dipped her fingers in and whatever it was, it felt warm. She tried to wipe it off her dress, but it was stuck to her fingers. She brought it up to her nose and sniffed. She licked it. And it didn't have a taste so much as a memory of a taste. And something compelled her to bring her hand up to her eye and wipe her fingers across. And when she opened her eye again, she saw that this was not a grand room in a grand house that she was in. She was in a hall of the dead. All around her was decay, was death, and there were children there. Dozens and dozens of children, some she knew, some who had lived in her village, some she had played with as a child, some she didn't know, some had strange faces. But she knew that all these children were dead. She looked around at the faces of the dead children, all looking at her. There was one girl she had known. This had been her friend who got scarlet fever and died. The little girl was no more than 8. She was wearing the dress she'd been buried in, and in her hand were snowdrops. The little girl walked up to Mary and took one of the snowdrops and pressed it into her fingers. She told Mary that she had to leave. She had to hurry. This was where they took the dead children. The people who came at night and took the dead children. They'd been there to take Mary's baby, but she had struck a light and they could not do their work while there was light. They came only by night, only by darkness. And Mary had to get back to her baby, had to save it. And if she held tight to this flower, she would return. But if she let go and if she let a single sound out of her mouth, both Mary and her baby would be lost. Mary held tight to the flower and ran from that place. She ran through a darkness that was not the darkness of night, but she ran and she ran and she ran. And she wanted to scream and she wanted to cry out. She wanted to cry to her friends to come to help to save her baby, but she remembered the warning and let out not a sound. At last she saw the light of her house, though it wasn't the light of a fire or the light of a candle or even the light of a moon. It was a different light, a light not from this world. She rushed inside. She looked about. Everyone else was asleep. But there in the cradle, by her empty bed, was her baby. She lit the light and looked on the baby's face. It was purple, almost black. It was as if something had its hand around the baby's neck and was squeezing tight, squeezing the life out of it, squeezing the air so the baby couldn't even cry. She took the flower and pressed it into her baby's mouth, her baby's open mouth, in a silent scream. And suddenly whatever was holding onto the baby's throat loosed its grip. The baby began to cry, and Mary had never heard such a beautiful sound as the sound of her baby crying. She picked the baby up and held it tight and wouldn't let it go all night. And even when the sun rose and her family came, she would not let her child go. And for more than a week, Mary would not let the baby go. And for more than a year, she would not let the child out of her sight. Mary knew that she had stopped whatever figures came by night from taking her baby. But she knew that if she had another, they would come again. And she was so fearful that they would take her child or take her too, that she did everything in her power never again to birth another child.
Excellent. You can always count on What Lady Wild for the mad stuff.
Yeah.
Supernatural intervention is an excellent reason to practice good contraception.
I'd never heard that story before, but I just, that image of the hall of dead children stuck in my head.
Weirdly, the hall of dead children image was familiar to me from an entirely different source, which was a Pokemon ROM hack.
What?
Called Hypno's Lullaby.
Oh, yeah.
Hypno's Lullaby, yeah.
Have you heard the song?
I have.
Oh, I don't know what. It's one of those ones where I'm not sure if I think it's just kitchen funny or if I'm secretly terrified and I'm lying to myself, telling myself that it's just kitchen funny.
For anyone not aware, the Pokemon Hypno, it's basically a bipedal tapir that hypnotizes people with a little pendulum. But its Pokedex entry says that it occasionally, in the wild, they occasionally kidnap children.
Lovely.
because they have to do that in Pokemon games. Every so often, there has to be a Pokemon that eats children.
I suppose, you've got so much mythology about, children going missing or being stolen. You have to work it in there somewhere.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you're trying to appeal to children. Before we go on to another story, there's just something I want to say to whoever's listening. I've probably told most of you guys already because I've told everyone, but I'm going to be cutting my hair, and I've got quite a lot of hair, and I'm going to be cutting off nearly 2 feet of it, not just because I feel like cutting my hair, but I'm going to be cutting it off because I'm raising money to do with female genital mutilation, or FGM. There is a charity called Akidwa. They're a women's immigration charity here in Ireland, but they also do a lot of work around FGM, around prevention, education, training for doctors and midwives, and also providing counselling for those who have undergone FGM, because there's estimated about 5,500 women living in Ireland who have had FGM done to them. So I'm cutting off my hair to raise money to help some of those women to get counselling. There's a GoFundMe. I'll put a link of it in the comments. If you have any money to spare, all donations are greatly appreciated. But if you would be able to share it, or just start having a conversation about FGM, because it is a global problem. It's not a problem that's over there somewhere else. It's a problem that is here in the world. If it affects one person, it affects all of us. And it's a horrible, horrible thing that should not ever happen. So just to bring it into down.
It is. No, it's an atrocious thing to do to a child, and it's excellent that there's organizations trying to put a stop to it.
Yeah. And it's just awful.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I honestly can't riff on FGM, to be honest. This
it's
appropriate jokes I can be putting in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
It's awful. Go support the GoFundMe.
Yeah. And if you want to know more about it, more sort of what you could do to help, or how you could, if you're in somewhere where people might be vulnerable, if you're working in a school or something like that, Akidwa on the website, they have more information about it. If you have been affected, where you can go, resources that are available, all the information will be on their website.
Well, on the light subject of genitals, I'll go into my depraved story. Quick note, this version of this story, which might be familiar to some people, relies on the assumption, which I read recently, that the Greek word for your thigh is also a euphemism for testicles. That will become very relevant much later on. Because as we start, we take you to the beautiful city of Thebes in ancient Greece. Now, living in Thebes at the time was a priestess of Zeus called Semele. And one day, a particularly fancy, exquisite-looking bull was brought to the temple, and Semele sacrificed it to Zeus. At the time, Zeus was flying around in the form of an eagle, looking for somebody to sexually assault. And he got wind of this wonderful bull sacrifice and knew right away that whoever sacrificed that fine quality of cow was definitely up for the ride. So he swooped over to Thebes, checked in on the city, and eventually he found Semele. At the time, Semele had decided to go and wash the blood off her body and had gone to the river Aspos. And that's where Zeus found her. Zeus transformed himself into an incredibly handsome man, because as we all know, you cannot look upon the Greek gods as a mortal, otherwise you will instantly die. So he rocks up to Semele as the incredibly gorgeous Hellenic man, and she instantly asks to know what the fuck he's doing there, spying on her, bathing herself. And Zeus plays his whole I'm a god shtick, And it works. She is literally a priestess devoted to Zeus. This is Zeus. It makes sense. They have a lot of fun together. They bang, and then they continue to bang monthly because, amazingly, Zeus has started to develop feelings for his new side chick. Speaking of feelings, though, Hera, his wife, was truly hurt at this stage. No matter how often it happened, Zeus's affairs still stung her just as deeply each time. It was such a betrayal, and after all, they were family. But it was once again infidelity o'clock, and the big bro had to find another mortal to play with his lightning rod. But Hera had a plan, as she always did. Hera transformed herself into an old crone and went down to the river Aspos and waited for Semele to show up for her regular rendezvous with Zeus. Eventually, Semele arrived. Hera greeted her as the old crone and asked why she'd come there, and Semele explained that she was there to meet the king of the gods, Zeus. And the old crone just burst out laughing. I bet that's what he said. Tell me, girl, do you drop your knickers for everyone claiming to be a god? Because I'm the queen of the gods, and I'm feeling a bit randy at the moment. Semele was not impressed. He really is a god, she said. It is Zeus, the god of thunder, king of the gods, and he has chosen me alone of all mortal women to be his lover. Right then, said the old crone. If you truly believe that this man is Zeus, what proof have you got? What has he actually done to prove he's a god? Semele thought. Well, and don't say the sex, said the crone. Semele thought longer. Nothing. Now that she thought about it, really, what evidence did she have to go on that this handsome, hunky man was really the god of thunder? And Hera, seeing the confused look on Semele's face, smiled. You know, there is a way you could prove that he really is a god. How? Asked Semele. Well, if you asked him to reveal his divine form to you, you'd know right away. Hide their true nature and their natural form. Semele waited for Zeus to arrive. And when Zeus did, she asked how she could be sure that Zeus truly loved her. He said he would give her anything under the sun. Any wish she wanted, he would grant, and he swore it by the river Styx. So, Semele asked Zeus to show her his godly form. He begged her to give her anything else. Anything. But she was resolute. He wouldn't yield. And so, eventually, unable to break his own vow, Zeus agreed. And so he revealed himself in all his glory. His golden body glowed like the sun. His hair and beard billowed and moved like dark clouds. His hair was dark clouds. Thunder boomed. His eyes flashed pure white. Lightning struck. Thunder boomed again. The storm raged. He was glorious. He was terrifying. Semele screamed. Her eyes burned. Every fiber of her was aflame as Zeus's radiance flayed her to her core. Zeus contained his divine form again and looked at what was left of Semele. In the smoking, charred mass, Zeus saw something. It was tiny, so very, very small, but it had a spark of life. It was fading fast, cast out too early, its only home burnt away. So Zeus decided to give it a new home. He took out a blade, pushed his testicles aside, and made an incision into his scrotum. He then took the tiny thing, slipped it in through the hole, took a needle and thread, sewed up the wound, and he waited. Months passed, and at this stage the situation was getting hard to ignore. His balls were huge. As every Greek knows, the ideal penis is small. Nice, small, 2 modest testes, like a sprig of asparagus resting over 2 kumquats. But Zeus was just obscene at this stage. It's more like a baby carrot astride two watermelons. Obviously, Zeus's scrotum was the talk of Mount Olympus. Apollo was convinced it was a cancerous growth, and he had Ares all riled up to pull a Kronos on Zeus and cut it off, but Hermes and Athena managed to talk him down. Hera, meanwhile, was just convinced that Zeus had picked up some odd STD from one of the nymphs again, and decided to wait for it to flare down again. In a way, she wasn't wrong, because what is life if not the ultimate STI? It's 100% fatal. While the Olympians were eating one evening and discussing the benefits of pederasty, Zeus suddenly leapt up and announced he really had to piss. He ran off to the latrine, clutching his swollen testicles. And soon the air was filled with horrible grunts and moans like claps of thunder as Zeus began to pass what the assembled gods could only assume was the mother of all kidney stones. Lads, let me tell you, kidney stones are no joke, but this was unimaginably worse. Words cannot describe. The urethra was not designed for such. It's not meant to, like, can you picture it? Zeus's petite Hellenic member, bulging as a 9-pound deity, moved from the scrotal pseudo-womb down along the shaft, finally crowning at the urinary meatus. You're welcome for that mental image. And if it makes you feel queasy, imagine how Zeus felt. After the most agonizing 8 hours of his life, Zeus emerged from the bathroom, holding his newborn son in his arms. For a while, no one said anything. They thought it best not to. But eventually, Hera took in a deep breath, let it out in a sigh. What's its name? Zeus looked at his sister wife with bloodshot eyes and mumbled, "What?" Zeus pointed, and Hera pointed at the squirming baby. That. What's its name? Zeus shrugged. I don't know. I have been through a lot today. Hermes, any ideas? How about Dionysus? Said Hermes. And so it was that Dionysus was born, and boy, is Dionysus a good time. He literally invented wine, probably shortly after hearing the story of his birth. And lest you are concerned about Semele, do not worry. Dionysus was a very good boy. After dying and being reborn a few times, Dionysus went down to the underworld, probably got Hades and his maybe also mother Persephone drunk, probably had a gangbang, rescued Semele from the underworld and made her a goddess. Proving once and for all that if someone approaches you for sex while you are bathing and they claim to be a Hellenic deity of thunder, you're better off giving in. Because chances are he's going to have his way with you one way or the other, and at least if you give in, you won't be a swan and you might become a goddess. The end.
Not sure about the moral of that.
Blame it on the Greeks.
See, the thing is... Go on, Emily.
I was just about to say, we've got a nice comment from Stephen halfway through the story about when the old woman offers sex, that if this was an Irish myth, of course they would get down to it and she'd turn out to be sovereignty.
Oh, damn right. That awkward moment.
Well, that was actually what I was about to say.
Person, she turns out to be the sovereignty of Ireland. I mean, hasn't that happened?
Also, so basically what happens while Zeus is scrotally pregnant is that he gets the proportionate ball sack of a rat.
Yeah.
Their scrotum is fucking massive.
Again, I'll take your word for it.
It's roughly about a sixth of their full body size.
What are they doing with them?
It's because they produce absolutely ridiculous amounts of sperm.
Again, I'll take your word for it.
I think the semen production of rats is something we all need to know.
It's kind of interesting that he was keeping the baby in his testicles, because didn't the Greeks think that basically it could either go innie or outie? It was the same thing. It was just either inside out.
Yeah, vagina was just an inverted penis.
And so the testicles were the ovaries?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no, so he was having an ectopic pregnancy on top of everything else.
Yeah. It wasn't a fun time. It was not a fun time. It's probably why he didn't really care when Dionysus was ripped apart by Furies.
Wait. So he actually had he had to get scrotally pregnant to get testicles the same size as the Dagdas.
Yes.
Yeah, but the Dagda has 3 of them.
That's true.
For those of you who don't know, there's a story Naoise tells fabulously and filthily. But at one point, the Dagda and a young Fomorian lady are having such a good time, his testicles fall off. So he picks up 3 boulders and just shoves them in where they used to be. But he picks up 3 of them because he thinks, well, having 2 was good, but if you could have a spare.
What's that? Like, he just blew 2 during one standard sexual encounter. He's gonna want a spare for the next time because the Dagda thinks ahead.
There is nothing standard about the Dagda and his sex life.
Which 2 counties was it where the border ditch was worn into the earth by the Dagdas dragging testicles?
Is that Black Pig's Dyke?
I think it might be Black Pig's Dyke.
I thought it was his staff, which could either be taken literally or euphemistically.
He used to take it literally and euphemistically as well. But I think that it was his staff, but I can't remember.
His club, it varies. Sometimes it's a club, sometimes it's a euphemism for his penis, and sometimes it's both simultaneously.
And sometimes it's the tree of the world.
I also love his ladle, which is apparently big enough for a man and a woman to lie comfortably inside.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the ladle. I knew about the cauldron, but I didn't know about the ladle.
Oh, the ladle. He's got. I don't know, like, how he carries the stuff around, because it's described many times the size of a human. Like, multiple things he owns are described as multiple times the size of human beings. Like, he's a big man.
Well, what they're leaving out is the Dagda's caravan, the Dagda's donkey, the Dagda's roadies.
He wasn't like a giant. He was just like an anime character.
Yeah.
So I've got a story about the Greek gods and getting up to questionable things. They're not as filthy as Naoise's, and I don't think I will make anyone pull the face. Naoise has succeeded in making me pull the face, as Deirdre pointed out. It's not a proper storytelling session unless I end up pulling the face. So once long ago, there was a king of a small Greek country. And as many kings do, he had 3 daughters, 3 beautiful daughters. But the youngest, Psyche, was by far the most beautiful. In fact, she was so beautiful that people couldn't believe that she was a mortal woman. Surely she must be some child of the gods. In fact, she must be a goddess. She must be Aphrodite incarnate. So beautiful was Psyche that people began to worship her rather than Aphrodite. Now, Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, is a jealous goddess. All gods are jealous, but Aphrodite was particularly jealous of this mortal who couldn't even hold a candle to her. And so she resolved to remove Psyche. Now, if Aphrodite had been Zeus, she would have just cast down a thunderbolt and smited her. But that wasn't how Aphrodite worked. She preferred more subtle methods. Now, Psyche was of marriageable age. And so, when the king went to the oracle to ask what should he do about his daughter and who should she marry, Aphrodite spoke in the place of the oracle and declared that Psyche was destined to wed a terrible creature, a creature so feared that even the gods trembled before its power. The king was most perturbed by this. Psyche was his daughter, his beloved daughter. He asked, was there no way to prevent this? No way to stop it? But no, this was Psyche's destiny. The king asked, what should they do? And the oracle, or Aphrodite speaking to the oracle, said that if the kingdom was not to be destroyed by Psyche's husband, she must be sacrificed to him. She must be taken up to the tallest cliff and thrown off. She would be taken by her monstrous husband and never seen again, and the kingdom would be left in peace. The king's heart broke. He told Psyche what had been said, and Psyche said, well, if this is the will of the gods, it is the will of the gods. You must do it, father. You must cast me off this cliff. I must be sacrificed if the kingdom is not to be destroyed by my monstrous husband-to-be. And so, dressed as a bride, Psyche was taken up to the cliff to be sacrificed. Her two sisters came along dressed as her bridesmaids, and they pulled sad faces. Poor Psyche, oh, poor Psyche. But inside they were gleeful. For they were beautiful, but no one noticed their beauty when Psyche was around. Psyche was all anyone could talk about. Everyone looked at Psyche, no one looked at them. With her out of the way, perhaps they would now get their chance. At the top of the cliff, Psyche said goodbye to her sisters, said goodbye to her father, and then waited for the priest to push her off the cliff. Now, as it happened, Cupid had been looking around the kingdom. His mother had been kicking up a fuss about some girl called Psyche. And when Cupid saw Psyche, he was taken aback by her beauty. She was gorgeous. He was so taken aback that his hand fell to his side and grazed across his arrows of love. He was pricked by his own arrow, and when he looked at Psyche, he was in love with her. A burning, passionate, all-consuming love. And so when she was cast off the cliff, he called to Zephyr, his friend the wind, and Zephyr caught up Psyche and took her to Cupid's palace. Psyche was astonished. She was flying through the air, and then she was in a beautiful garden. There were fountains and flowers, and there was a palace. She walked through the palace, and it seemed to be full of invisible servants. For when she was thirsty, wine was poured for her. When she was tired, she was shown to a bed. But she was worried. This must be the home of the monster she was to wed. Perhaps she was only being fed this wonderful food so that she would be fattened up. That night, Psyche lay down in the softest bed she had ever been in. She had been a royal princess, but this was luxury she had never known. She lay there in the darkness waiting. And in the darkness, she heard footsteps. She heard something moving about the room. She heard something on the other side of the bed. She felt the bed dip slightly as something placed its weight in it, and something shifted the sheets. Psyche stayed silent, waiting to be devoured. But nothing happened. There were no teeth, no talons. Nothing touched her. She spoke into the darkness. "Are you my husband?" And the thing in the darkness replied in a sweet voice, in a kind voice, in a gentle voice. "Only if you would have me as such." Psyche reached out her hand in the darkness along the bed and felt something warm, soft and pliant. It was an arm. She traced down the arm and found a wrist. She found a palm and fingers. She turned over. She followed the arm up to the elbow, to the shoulder. She felt there was a neck, a chest. She felt muscles under the skin, smooth skin. She traced up to a jaw. Her fingers moved over eyelids with long curling lashes. She felt a nose, a straight, strong nose, full lips. If you are my husband, may I kiss you? I've never kissed before. And the night was spent quite happily between the two after that. And so it passed. Psyche would spend her days in the beautiful palace, her every whim attended to by invisible hands. And each night in the darkness, her husband would come to her. Sometimes they would talk, sometimes they didn't. Her days were full of joy, but she began to miss her family. She began to wonder what was happening to her father, who thought that she had been taken off by some monster to her sisters. She didn't say this to her husband. She didn't want to upset him. He had done so much for her. He had gone out of his way to make sure she had everything she needed, but he seemed to sense something was amiss. And one night he asked her, Psyche, are you happy here? Oh, yes, my love, of course I am happy here. But what? You can tell me. You can tell me anything. Well, I do miss my family sometimes. And I would like to see them, just to let them know that I'm all right. All right. I will arrange for you to see your family. Zephyr shall come, shall take you to them, and then shall take you back. But Psyche, don't tell them about me. Don't mention me. They might ask you, but stay silent on that matter. And Psyche agreed. She wouldn't mention her husband. Why? And then she began to think that, well, even if she wanted to, she couldn't. She didn't even know his name. She knew his face by touch, but she had never seen it. She knew his scent she would know anywhere, but she'd never seen him. She didn't even know his name. This began to trouble her. And when Zephyr came and took her to her family, to her sisters, that was all she could think of. The fact that she didn't know the name of her beloved, that they had never shown her his face. Her sisters noticed that something was amiss, and they began to needle, and they began to press. And they were good at this. And eventually Psyche burst out, I've never seen my husband's face. I know that he is something great and powerful, and he's so kind and he's so gentle, but I've never seen his face. Her sisters gave each other a knowing look and then began to say, oh, poor Psyche. There's a reason he's never shown you his face. He is some foul beast. He's luring you into a false sense of security, all the better to strike. And when Psyche was returned, it couldn't be true. She knew her love, but she had to be certain. And so that night, when she heard her husband drift off to sleep and his breath become deep and steady, she got a lantern. She lit it. She held it high above her head so that she might see, and the light fell on the form lying there in her bed. And it was a beautiful form, the form of a handsome young man. And on his back, 2 great feathery wings grew. And Psyche knew who this was. This was Eros. This was Cupid. But as she held her lantern high, a drop of hot oil landed on his skin. He woke with a start, with a scream. And that burn, though it was only a small burn because it had been dealt to him by his love, it was deeper and more painful than any mortal wound. The house vanished. The gardens vanished. Cupid vanished. And Psyche was alone in the forest. She fell to her knees and wept. She knew that this was her fault. She had broken the spell. She had lost her love. She vowed that she would just sit there and wait till death came, be it death from starvation or exposure or wild animals. She didn't care. She just wanted to die. Meanwhile, Cupid ran back to his mother, to Venus, to Aphrodite. She took her son and cooed and comforted him. Oh, that horrible girl. She passed her hand over his face and he fell into a deep sleep. In the woods, Psyche wept. But when she had wept all her tears and death had still not come to claim her, she decided she would not sit and wait for it. She would go and find her love or find death, whichever came first. And so she searched. And she searched high and she searched low. And she asked the river, where would she find her love? And she asked the trees, where would she find her love? And she asked the wind, where would she find her love? And at last they told her Cupid was with his mother. And so she went to the temple of Aphrodite. She prostrated herself before the altar, begging for the goddess of love and beauty to come to her. And proud Aphrodite came. She looked down on this mortal that they had worshipped in her stead. She vowed to make her suffer. She grabbed Psyche by her hair. So, girl, you think you're worthy of my son? Let us put you to the test. She gave Psyche a bucket of lentils and peas. She tipped them out onto the ground and said, well, you have till sunset to sort these two. And so Aphrodite left and Psyche went to her task, but how was she ever to sort them in time? She began to weep again, and then a voice from the ground said, stop it, you'll drown me. She looked down and there was an ant, a small talking ant, which wasn't unusual. She said, I'm sorry, ant, but if I cannot sort these lentils and peas by sunset, I will never find my love. And the ant said, well, if it'll stop you crying, me and my brothers will help. And so the ants did. They sorted the peas and the lentils. And when Aphrodite returned at sunset, the task was done. Psyche said, please, will you take me to my love? And Aphrodite thought, well, if I set her another task, she'll just find some more animal helpers. She is mortal. I have one more task for you. I am the goddess of beauty, and my beauty regiment, well, it is not of the normal kind. It's not just wash, tone, exfoliate. I need you to retrieve my cold cream. It's made from the water of the river Styx. Go to the underworld. Bring me back a jar full of it, and then perhaps I shall let you see Cupid. And so Aphrodite left, and Psyche went off in search of the river Styx. But no living mortal can go to the world of the underworld. But there is one who passes back and forth, Persephone. And so Psyche waited and searched out Persephone. And as the seasons were changing, she followed Persephone down to the underworld. And as the queen of the underworld crossed the river Styx, Psyche knelt and took a jug of the water. She waited then again till the seasons were changed, sitting by the side of the river Styx, surrounded by the lost and wailing dead, until at last Persephone came again and she could follow her back into the world of the living. Psyche was so filled with joy. She was about to see her love again, but what if he would not love her? What if he could not forgive her? What if she was no longer beautiful? What if the weeping and all the time spent in the underworld had drained away her beauty? What if he rejected her? But she had part of the beauty remedy of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Surely a little drop of the water wouldn't go amiss. She dipped her fingers in, but no mortal can touch the river Styx. No mortal can touch its waters. And when Psyche touched that water, she fell down dead. And Aphrodite rejoiced. At last, Psyche was gone. She woke Cupid up from his enchanted sleep and told him he needn't fret any more about that silly mortal princess. She was dead. And Cupid was despairing. His love was gone. How could he go on without Psyche? It was as if his soul had been ripped away from him. He went through the world and the winds told him how Psyche had died, how she had been tricked. And Cupid went to his mother and said, Mother, you are the goddess of love, but not all love. You are a love of a particular kind, a passionate, an all-consuming, fiery love, a love that is like madness. But that is not the love that will sustain the world. You need the love of friendship, the love of companionship, the quiet love. Without those, the world will burn. And until I have my love, I shall shoot no more arrows. People shall come to hate you, mother, if they have only your love, only your mad passion. They will rather kill their children than let them succumb to it. The world will die out. It will be nothing but wailing and weeping and then dust and ash. This is what will happen if you do not return Psyche to me. I shall shoot no more arrows. I shall go on strike. And Venus laughed her son. Silly notion. But then she began to look at the world. Cupid was shooting no more arrows. There was no more love of friendship. There was no more familial love, platonic love. There was no more lasting love. Aphrodite cast down her love, and people, they were filled with mad, burning passions. Medea slew her children for Jason. But that was not the type of love that could sustain the world. And the other gods began to turn on Aphrodite. People were going mad. People were dying off. They needed Cupid to be shooting his arrows. They needed Eros to be back at work. And so, eventually, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, had to give in. Because though they laughed at him as a silly boy with his toy bow and arrow, the power that Cupid had was so great it made all the gods of Olympus tremble. And so all the gods of Olympus rose Aphrodite's daughter-in-law. They rose Psyche from the dead. They granted her immortality. And Psyche and Eros were joined together. And they say when soul and heart are joined, perfect unity and perfect love shall reign. I just had a horrible moment of, has my mic been on mute that whole time?
Yeah. I love that story.
There's the longer version of a Pan helping Psyche get her bloodthirsty revenge on her sisters, but long enough without it.
You can always count on. But Aphrodite, it has to be said, is just a complete bitch. Like,
yeah,
she is the worst.
I really like the position Hera has in the way we perceive a lot of Greek mythology nowadays. That was actually Aphrodite's place. Mm-hmm. It was Aphrodite who was really jealous and bitter and vindictive.
Well, I mean, Aphrodite was created by a son chopping off his father's penis.
Yeah.
That's her origin story.
Yeah, and mixing with the sea. That's how you get
I was just about to say an awful lot of the origins of Greek gods happen with a penis, but like when you think about it, it's actually all of them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the origins of a lot of things that don't reproduce asexually involve.
Yeah.
I'm actually pretty sure that Zeus has given birth more than Hera, but I might be wrong there.
She's done it twice. He's given birth from the head and the thing. So I think they're tied.
I always forget who's at because Zeus just will screw anything that moves. It's kind of hard to keep track of who's actually the mother of the vast majority of his children. Even the gods, like
someone he's related to.
Definitely isn't.
Right. So moving from like discussions of super fertility to a slightly different end of that spectrum. So Harry and Henrietta Stottle had been trying to have a child for years and years, and nothing was happening. They were having no luck at all until finally, Henrietta was pregnant. She carried the baby for 9 months. The baby was delivered at home. It was all going perfectly, all going exactly according to plan. They couldn't be happier. They had a lovely little baby girl. And the week after she was born, a troop of fairies kicked in the door, led by a fairy fiddler. And the fiddler, he says, you know what? I fancy a holiday. I'm bored playing the fiddle for the fairies all the time. Down in the fairy world, they're a terrible audience, I'll tell you that. So listen, I'm going to stay up here for a while, but I can't stay up here normally. Someone has to replace me. So this lot, they're going to take your daughter down to the fairy world to take my place for a while, and I'll be staying with you instead. So the fiddler, he sleeps in the main bed. Harry and Henrietta, they're having to sleep on the floor. Every single night, he hosts an impromptu concert in their home, and everyone from the village comes to see it because they're all scared shitless of the fiddler. And Harry and Henrietta, they do nothing to stop it because they are even more terrified of him. So every night he plays this concert, and every single night people are shouting and cheering for him because they're very, very worried about what he'll do if they don't. And this goes on for about 6 months. 6 months straight of fiddle playing every single night, right into the small hours. They barely got any sleep. 6 months of waiting on this fairy, hand and foot, this fairy who had effectively orchestrated the kidnap of their long-awaited daughter. They were beginning to get a little bit tired of it, as you might expect. And just as Harry was finally steeling up his nerve, just as he started nailing horseshoes to a big stick, the fiddler gets up out of their bed. He plays their little wake-up tune on his fiddle, because of course he does. And he says, you know what? It's been about 6 months. It's been a lovely holiday. I've loved every moment of it. It was great. But listen, I think it's time I went home. Now, I know you're very sad. I know you don't want to see me go, but I have to go. I'm very grateful to you. So I'm going to be heading back to the fairy world. My friends, they're on their way already. They're bringing your daughter. I know you don't want that, but we can't be looking after her anymore. But sure, listen. Yeah, because she spent so much time down there, you're going to have to make sure she doesn't marry anyone in this village, or she'll be pulled back down into the fairy world for the rest of all time, basically. So yeah, just be careful of that. Minor side effect. I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, thanks for having me. And I'll see you next time. So he heads back into the fairy hill, and his friends come and they bring the baby back. They lay her back in her cot, and she seems, she kind of eyes up the fiddle that's been left, eyeing it up in a way that seem to very strongly indicate there might be more to the story that I haven't been told yet. And they seemed, at least, to live happily ever after.
That broke me.
The title of the story, because I found it on Dukas, the title of the story is actually The Fairy Fiddler. And it was not about what I was hoping it was about.
Don't worry, it wasn't my mind. It wasn't my mind. That's all I could see was the child capture or snatcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as a fairy.
But I love the fact that it was like, because even in the actual story that I read, he just walks straight in. Like, it's not happening in secret. Everyone knows exactly what's happened.
See, this was before the penal laws when fairies were allowed to openly operate in Ireland. One of Daniel O'Connell's main campaigns was to get the fairies back on the ground. Somebody needs to write a show about Irish folklore with Daniel O'Connell just as the hero in every story.
Harry Stottle teams up with Daniel O'Connell.
It just makes it so much better that it's all just happening to Harry. He's had a hard life.
For those who don't know, I'd like to explain.
So
Harry Stottle.
Another thing I found on the Dukas archive a while back reminded me of something I already knew, that the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle actually appears surprisingly often in Irish folklore. But the Dukas entry that I read was talking about a saying. It's a saying you would use if something was very confusing, and the saying went, "It would puzzle Harry Stottle," which is clearly someone just not understanding how people were saying Aristotle and how that name works, and that it was Greek and not English. I just love that. So I've decided anytime I'm telling a story where the protagonist goes unnamed, their name will be Harry Stottle instead.
I like to think that the Greek philosopher was reincarnated in between 16th and 19th century Ireland and just had a lot of shit happen to him.
I'm tempted to do a series of Harry Stottle books.
I think you should.
Would Red be interested in illustrating them?
Probably.
Harry Stottle versus the Puka. Harry Stottle, who had no story. Harry Stottle inexplicably becomes a fairy midwife.
He goes to the secret druid school under the fairy hill.
But that also reinforced what we've been talking about before, that the fairies are essentially colonial powers in Ireland. It's coming in here without so much as a buy or leave. I'm taking your cards. Watch as I fiddle back children.
It is a pretty common story thread, actually, where the fairy will come in and in some way just take a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually not quite that overt, but
they're usually a bit more subtle about
it. They usually at least pretend not to be a fairy.
Do you know the one which is basically just like an assault on a house? It's like one, like they're just pretty new mother and father just got into this new cottage, and suddenly the lights go out one evening and they hear this mad cackling from the corner, and there's this hag going back and forth going and the Dullahan just bursts in, and the guy grabs an iron poker and he's trying to fight off the Dullahan and the hags while the Fair Jared gets around the back and steals the baby.
I haven't seen that one. I've seen the one with the very, very similar setup. The lights go out, there's cackling sounds, there's rattling all over the place. And then they go downstairs and there's a headless priest just going mental in the kitchen.
Speaking of priests, one of my favorites is the
Oh no.
black dog.
Huh?
A priest is called to give the last rites very late at night.
Mm-hmm.
He goes off, and as he's going along, he hears this beautiful, melodious singing. Like, it's absolutely gorgeous and enchanting. So he goes off the path a bit, and he suddenly just sees this magnificent, shaggy black dog bounding in the breeze, singing in this beautiful baritone. And he goes, that's the feckin' devil. I know it. He's come here to distract me from giving this person the last rites. Because the devil knows that the only way to distract a priest from giving the last rites is to have a black dog sing in a resident.
Of course.
And the story usually ends with him going, yeah, see you, dog. You're not getting me this time. No. Saving a soul for heaven.
My favorite appearance of a black dog is it was guarding a spot just on a road, as black dogs usually do. As someone got too close to it and it disappeared for a moment, and when it reappeared, it wasn't a dog anymore. It was a six-legged horse with no head, and that was the end of the story.
What is with the Irish people and inexplicably headless things? Like, so many stories just, and then it didn't have a head. I've just finished filming my dual hand video for my channel. Excellent.
And so many headless things. So many. I found headless people on foot, headless people on horses, headless priests, headless women. There was headless horses. Headless horses are weirdly common.
Yeah.
Very weirdly common, and they're way more dangerous than headless riders. Way more dangerous. But also a headless sheep and a headless turkey. And the sheep was a ghost draining the life out of someone.
Of course.
And the turkey was an embodiment of hell itself.
Of course. Of course it is.
Just absolutely bizarre.
I could just imagine some lad in Kerry just go, oh, you see that turkey down the road there, the one without the head? Helen Carnett.
I think Emily? We have lost Emily.
You
should.
Oh, the laptop has cut off. I see.
Okay.
I think we are at the 8:30 point anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, we may as well call it there, I suppose.
Yeah. So thank you all for coming and listening to the filth and depravity and ongoing adventures of Harry Stottle. The story ended with about as subtle at the end ... question mark as possible. So hoping for a sequel. Well, we have social media now, so if anyone is any requests, questions that they want us to answer, we actually do know some things, pop them into our Twitter at Unlicensed Oral Arts, or on our Facebook, because we're still using Facebook. If the fact that we couldn't stream up on the place today didn't give you a hint, we don't do the modern technology. I'm a millennial. I know Facebook, the Twitter, and that's about it. Yeah, but that's pretty much all, I think.
Hi, sorry.
We're back. We were just signing off.
Oh, we have Emily.
My laptop just suddenly decided to shut down.
Technology's not
weird.
Yeah, is the stream still going?
Yeah,
it's still going. We were just about to end it.
All right. Well, great. Now I can try to work out how to turn the stream off.
Hopefully, otherwise it's going to be ongoing.
I was actually trying to add into the description sort of like various links to where you can find us and so on, which is irritating because it's now all gone.
Okay, so all right. Well, while Emily is doing that, speaking on the headless horses, there was one really weird one I found in which a young man, he was rejected by a woman in his village, and so he cast a pishog on her, which is kind of like a curse. And because of that pishog, this woman was followed around by a headless horse for weeks until she got the priest to sort it out for her. And just that, like, lads, just accept rejection. Like, grow up.
I also like that at
That's
the end of
nuts.
the day, we all in Ireland secretly know that the local parish priest is the only one who can actually sort it out for you. Like, you'll try everyone. You don't want to bother Father Matthews, but, like, you know, at the end of the day, when it really gets serious, you've got to go to the local priest.
That's only if you don't have someone like Biddy Early around.
It's one of my favorite quotes. I think it's one of Eddie Lenihan's ones, but it's talking about, then this proved to all the people that the priests have the power. They just sometimes refuse to use it. As if they've got all these ungodly, saintly powers that they're just not using, and they'd much rather just spend the afternoon giving mass and having tea and biscuits.
Actually, question, you two seem like the right people to ask. I heard
Yes.
reference to this story on Story Archaeologist, but I haven't been able to find it, about, you know, a man is walking along one day and he meets the devil on the road, as you do. And the devil keeps trying to go into various houses to cause mischief, but he can't go into any of the houses where the husband and wife are getting on. But he finds one where they're having a row, goes in and says, just wait for me 5 minutes, goes in and impregnates the woman and comes out going, right, the child of the devil is going to be born here in 9 months. And so the man feels an obligation to keep an eye on the child of the devil, who eventually grows up to become a priest. And the man basically has to wander around thwarting baptisms, because any child baptized by the son of the devil will be something, their soul will be stolen.
Satanic baptisms are a menace on society.
I was just wondering if any of you knew that story, where I could find that story, because I just heard them mention it in passing. I was like, I want that story.
You know what episode?
It doesn't sound familiar.
I think they were talking about corpse carrying.
Oh, corpse. Yeah, I'll have a look through, because I know it sounds vaguely familiar. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to find it from their references anyway. It might be one of Sean O'Sullivan's, because he's got an excellent collection, which is impossible to actually get anymore.
That reminds me, Nisha, have you heard of Dún Druch Fulla?
Ooh, remind me.
It's supposedly it translates as the Castle of Tainted Blood.
I like the
And-
name.
Familiar.
And it's a place where vampires live. And people, I was going to say people, not people, Bob Curran says that this is where the name Dracula actually came from.
Wait,
yeah,
is that where the vampire lady leprechauns live?
they're from Sneed.
No, that's a separate thing. But
Yeah,
Bob Curran, sorry, go on.
he mentions that in the intro to Avartach in two of it, because he mentions Avartach in at least two of his books, and it's mentioned in the Field Guide to the Undead anyway, and I'm pretty sure I think it's also in his Guide to Vampires, but I don't have it, but he might go into it more, because I love Bob, but he reuses his material for every single book he does. And
I'm waiting for both books to arrive. I've ordered them because I'm working on an Avartach script.
Ooh.
But apparently, Bob Curran says he got this from a lecture given by Sean O'Sullivan.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Now, the thing is, it has shown up absolutely nowhere in anything O'Sullivan has written.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, Bob Curran was the only one who was at that lecture.
Yeah.
Was it a lecture given in the pub?
Yeah. he also like the whole drinking blood thing, the drinking blood out of the wooden bowl thing with Avatok. He references what was the name of the text? Something it was a text referenced in place names of ancient Ireland. I can't remember the name of the actual text.
Guys, Deirdre has just sent me a link to a thing on JSTOR, The Devil's Son as a Priest. Thank you, Deirdre.
Sweet, wonderful.
Yeah,
Good job, Deirdre.
Yeah, I'm going to send it to you guys in the chat. Woo! So this might be a story we end up telling next month.
Fantastic.
But yeah, there's no reference in that text to Avatok drinking blood.
Of course.
There's lots of reference to him returning from the dead, but none to him drinking blood. And then he does give actual references to texts about Irish vampires that are properly searchable. One of the manuscript collectors at the Dukas Archive, but those manuscripts have neither been transcribed nor translated. So I'm going to do it. Because I'm getting suspicious.
I wouldn't be surprised if he is just going, well, actually, I heard this in the pub, but I need to make this seem a lot more legit.
Yeah, I'm very suspicious.
Best to be honest. Like the only sources I actually trust on Irish folklore now is pretty much Dukas itself, because
like there's some things. Sorry, go on.
You just know what you're getting in. Like, you know the biases that Dukas has from the get-go. You know the inherent problems of, well, this is the school's collection, and this is what they're working off. Like, you can come in with the baggage prepared, you can sift through it. Whereas the other was like, well, they could have been making this bullshit up. They could have heard that from some other place.
Yes, but if you repeat the bullshit often enough, it becomes folklore bullshit.
Yeah, it does. There's a few places where Dukas has holes, like Northern Ireland at the moment, because the school's collection didn't touch Northern Ireland at all.
I wonder why.
And a lot of the manuscript collection from the north just isn't up yet.
Yeah.
There's also, they barely touched urban areas at all. The Folklore Commission didn't get around to that until like the 80s.
Yeah.
And none of that's been digitized yet.
Actually,
so Dublin folklore is just not there. Sorry, Emily?
On the school's collection that is there, I was having a look through it one day and just sort of like randomly picking up places. And I think I found my grandmother.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful.
Well, there's, someone from roughly the same area with the same name, with very similar handwriting. The only thing is that there's dozens of O'Donnells around the place. So
yeah.
And we're a little bit fudgy on the dates, but it was I
would have attempted to see if my grandfather was on the list, but again, he was in Dublin, so they largely ignored Dublin. And also trying to find Michael Dunn.
There are a few of them.
Yeah.
The only more difficult task would be finding Kevin Kniff in Wicklow, because there's at least 6 within a 5-mile radius of our land.
Yeah, my mother's family are easier to identify because they spell their surnames weird.
That's what you want. That is what you want.
Weird spelling.
Do we have the links up?
Yes, I think I have now put them in the description.
Excellent.
Okay. So then I think we can probably sign off.
We'll sign off and stop the rambling for now.
All right. So reminder of who we are and where people can find us.
Mhm.
Stephen?
Yeah, we are Unlicensed Oral Arts. We use that name here on YouTube, but also on Facebook and Twitter as of last week. If you have any questions for us, those are the places where you should be reaching out. They're the best place. I feel personally Twitter is easier to keep an eye on. Posts get lost on Facebook a lot.
To be honest, yeah, if you are actually wanting to keep up with news, I'm currently posting more on Facebook because there is more followers on Facebook, but I much prefer to just do it on Twitter because also I don't have to come up with as much imaginative material when I've only got 250 characters.
And if people are looking for you in particular, Stephen, where will they find you?
Oh, just type in Hug and Dice anywhere. It's my website, it's my Facebook, my Twitch, my Twitter, my Instagram, and my TikTok, and my email address.
If you're looking for me in particular, I'm Tales from the Shadows. If you're looking for that fundraiser against FGM for cutting off about 2 feet of this, links in the description, and Akidwa, which is AKIDWA, Akidwa, and they're the place to go. And Nisha?
Again, you can find me personally as Nisha Odin. It's thankfully a rather rare name. On Twitter and Facebook, I'm also mostly the face behind the pages for our Unlicensed Oral Arts, so that is probably the best way to contact me personally. And please do contact me. It's a lonely pandemic. I know a bit about folklore, and if you have any questions about it, please do ask. There's no question to a name because I will have fun trying to find an answer, even if I don't get you one.
That's a challenge to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, wasn't there a challenge of someone to send you the most obscene folklore they knew?
And nothing.
I'm disappointed in you people of the internet.
I'm disappointed. I've also been trying to find out feckin' folklore about the wyvern statue in Bray, but that's not giving any fruit either. I'm gonna have to make some up at this stage.
I think someone was trying to carve a statue of a dog and it just wasn't working, so they went with it.
I have a sneaking suspicion it's to do with the royal family that used to basically own Bray, but
yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was one of their crest animals, but it's not the same one that's in the town hall, so it's very confusing.
Right.
And where can we find you, Emily?
What?
And where can we find you?
Oh, I said Tales from the Shadows. And Neil has just said thank you for the stream. Thank you very much for watching us.
Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming.
Great. And I'm going to press the end button and see what happens. So goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Hopefully it will end.
Okay.
If not, we're just going to